The morning of July 24th, 1911, an 11-year-old Quechua boy named Pablito Alvarez led a Yale professor up a rocky slope east of Cusco. The professor's name was Hiram Bingham. After 3 hours of climbing, the clouds parted. Bingham saw a stone city on a mountain ridge, 2,430 meters high. The jungle had eaten it for 378 years. The world would later call it Machu Picchu. Bingham documented every temple. He shot 250 photographs that day. But he missed something. Something that Pablito Alvarez likely knew. And 101 years later, a French archaeologist would prove it. In our last episode, we examined the chamber sealed behind Lincoln's head at Mount Rushmore, the Hall of Records, designed by Gutzon Borglum. One room, one granite slab, one secret, locked since 1998. Today, we go deeper to a place much more famous. 1.5 million people visit it every year. And the secret is not just one room, it is roughly a dozen. Machu Picchu was built in the middle of the 15th century under Emperor Pachacuti. It sits on a ridge between two peaks of the Vilcabamba Range in Peru at an elevation of 2,430 meters. The Inca built it without iron, without wheels, without pack animals. Every granite block, some weighing up to 50 tons, was cut and fitted so precisely that you cannot slide a sheet of paper between two stones. In 1532, Spanish forces under Francisco Pizarro ambushed and captured Emperor Atahualpa at Cajamarca. 1 year later, on November 15th, 1533, Pizarro entered Cusco. The Inca Empire officially collapsed. But Machu Picchu was different. The Inca were not defeated there. They withdrew on their own. They sealed the gates themselves. They let the jungle swallow the city. For 378 years, no one in the Western world knew Machu Picchu existed. Bingham published his findings in National Geographic in 1913. The world called him the discoverer of Machu Picchu. But for more than a century after that, roughly 1.5 million tourists each year walked past Inca temples without knowing that on the western side of the site, one stone door has remained sealed since the 15th century. In 2012, a French archaeologist named Thierry Jamin led a joint French-Peruvian-Spanish team to Machu Picchu. They carried electromagnetic resonance equipment. They scanned the walls around that sealed door. Their instruments detected, behind that door, approximately a dozen empty chambers, arranged in a deliberate pattern, sealed since before the Spanish ever set foot in Peru. This is not a conspiracy theory. Jamin's report was published in European archaeological press. The Peruvian government initially agreed to let him open it. Then they changed their mind. So why have you never heard about this sealed door? Why has the Peruvian government, after 13 years, refused to let Jamin or anyone else open it? And most importantly, what is behind it? In the next 22 minutes, we will answer all three questions. To understand the sealed door beneath Machu Picchu, you must first understand the people who built it. Pachacuti Yupanqui took the throne in 1438. When he assumed power, the Inca Empire controlled only a small valley around Cusco. Across more than 3 decades of rule, he expanded it along the Andes Mountains. By the time of his grandson, Emperor Huayna Capac, around 1525, the empire stretched across approximately 2 million square kilometers. From modern Ecuador to southern Chile, it was the largest empire ever to exist on the American continents before Columbus arrived. Pachacuti began building Machu Picchu around 1450, not as a large city, but as a royal estate, a retreat a spiritual center. Why this high mountain location? There are 3 reasons that modern archaeologists agree on. First, the Urubamba River surrounds 3 sides of the ridge, providing natural defense. Second, the location aligns with sacred peaks the Inca called Apu, or mountain spirits. Third, the microclimate at 2,430 meters allowed crops that Cusco could not grow. But the most haunting question is not why, it is how. The main material at Machu Picchu is granite, quarried directly from the mountain itself. Some blocks weigh up to 50 tons. The Inca had no iron tools to cut them, no wheels to transport them, no draft animals, because llamas cannot pull heavy loads. And yet, they cut each stone into polygonal shapes that fit perfectly against the next, without mortar. This technique is called ashlar masonry. Today, 600 years later, the walls still stand through earthquakes that have shaken Cusco repeatedly. People have tried slipping a sheet of paper between stones. It does not fit. This is engineering at a level the West did not recognize until Bingham climbed that ridge in 1911. And this is also why the sealed door that Jamin found in 2012 matters so much. The Inca did not seal a door and lock approximately a dozen chambers behind it by accident. They did it on purpose. They did it before they left Machu Picchu forever. The question is, for what purpose? Back to 1911. Bingham was not the first person to set foot on Machu Picchu. This is the part that textbooks usually skip. When Bingham climbed the ridge with Pablito Alvarez on July 24th, he did not find an empty city. At least 3 Quechua families were living and farming in the area, using the old terraces as fields. Their children played among the temples. Bingham wrote in his journal that he had lunch with the Richarte family, one of the farming households. So what did Bingham actually do? He brought Machu Picchu into the awareness of the Western world. In 1912, he returned with funding from Yale and National Geographic. 3 consecutive expeditions in 1911, 1912, and 1915 removed approximately 46,000 archaeological artifacts, bones, ceramics, stone tools, a few Inca mummies, all shipped by steamer to New Haven, Connecticut. 99 years later, Peru sued for their return. After years of legal dispute, Yale returned the artifacts across 2011 and 2012. During his expeditions, Bingham did document some stone structures. He named one cave with an altar, the Royal Mausoleum. He thought it was the burial place of Emperor Pachacuti. Later, carbon dating and excavation refuted this theory. The Royal Mausoleum contained no human remains. Bingham documented what he could see, but there was one door on the western side of the site that he and his team walked past many times without noticing. Why? 3 reasons. First, Bingham was only at Machu Picchu for a few weeks each year. He had no time for systematic survey. Second, technology. In 1911, no instrument could see through solid granite without breaking it. Third, and this is rarely mentioned, he did not ask the right people. Pablito Alvarez was mentioned in Bingham's writing only briefly in his 1922 book, Inca Land. Pablito knew the trails. He knew the medicinal plants. He knew how to move safely through the Andean jungle. There is a strong likelihood that Pablito also knew the Quechua oral stories about what lay behind certain stone walls. But Bingham never interviewed him in depth. No translator recorded their conversations. Pablito disappeared from archaeology. This is one of the great tragedies of 20th century archaeology. A Western man wrote his name into history as the discoverer of Machu Picchu. An indigenous boy, who likely knew part of the answer, was erased from the story. A century would pass before someone brought the right equipment to the right wall and asked the right question. To understand the sealed door at Machu Picchu, you must understand the man who found it. Thierry Jamin is a French archaeologist, born in 1967 in western France. From a young age, he was obsessed with a single story, the story of Paititi. Paititi, in Inca legend, is the final city of gold. When Pizarro entered Cusco in 1533, Inca priests are said to have carried much of the royal treasury into the Amazon rainforest to the east. They built a new city, hidden in the jungle, to protect the gold from the Spanish. The conquistadors never found it. 5 centuries later, dozens of Western expeditions have died in the Peruvian Amazon searching for Paititi. None succeeded. Jamin began exploring Peru in 1996. He used satellite imagery to identify man-made structures in the jungle. In 2009, his team located 35 previously undocumented pre-Columbian stone structures in the Madre de Dios region. In 2011, he applied for permission to survey the entire Machu Picchu complex, searching for clues to the route to Paititi. The Peruvian Ministry of Culture granted permission to him and his French-Peruvian-Spanish team. Their primary instrument was an electromagnetic resonance device, sometimes called a molecular frequency discriminator. This instrument does not penetrate stone like radar does. Instead, it measures the electromagnetic response of different materials and can detect empty cavities behind a solid wall. In April 2012, Jamin and his team arrived at Machu Picchu. They scanned systematically through every major structure: the Temple of the Sunday, the Temple of the Condor, the Intihuatana, the residential quarters, but the most striking result came from an unexpected place. On the western side of the site, there was a granite wall that looked like every other wall. When Jamin's instrument scanned across it, the reading spiked sharply. Behind that wall, there was something. Jamin and his team spent 3 weeks verifying the results. The granite wall that triggered the electromagnetic response was not just a wall, it was a door, about 2 meters high, 1 meter wide, sealed with granite blocks cut in the ashlar style, identical to the outer walls of Machu Picchu itself. This was not temporary storage. This was a space designed to stay closed forever. Behind the door, Jamin's instrument detected approximately a dozen empty chambers. Each chamber was about the volume of a small room. They were not scattered randomly, the way natural geological cavities would be. They were arranged in a deliberate pattern in what Jamin called a honeycomb labyrinth. Picture this. You stand before a stone wall, 2 meters tall. The wall hides a door. Behind the door, a corridor leads into a network of small chambers, all sealed before the 16th century, all untouched. There is an important caveat to make clear. The electromagnetic resonance method is not magic. It has limits. It tells you that empty cavities exist behind the wall. It does not tell you what is inside them. To know that, someone has to dig. Jamin knew this. In his report submitted to the Peruvian Ministry of Culture in June 2012, he requested a permit to drill a small hole through the stone door, insert a fiber optic camera, and record video of the chambers behind. No destruction. No disturbance of the original granite, just a needle-sized hole, patched afterward with compatible material. The Ministry of Culture initially agreed. The permit was issued in August 2012. Jamin and his team prepared their equipment in Cusco, ready to proceed in October. Then, on September 28, 2012, the permit was revoked. The official reason given by the Ministry of Culture, a need for additional preservation impact assessment, the actual reason was far more complicated. When Jamin received the revocation notice, he was not the only one surprised. The Ministry of Culture had been pressured from multiple sides. The first pressure came from the indigenous Quechua community. In their worldview, Machu Picchu is not just an archaeological site. It is the home of the Apu, the mountain spirits. Any intervention in the stone structures is seen as a violation. When news of Jamin's permit spread to Quechua villages in the region, community leaders wrote petitions demanding its cancellation. The second pressure came from Peruvian archaeologists. Some scholars in the country opposed the electromagnetic resonance method, arguing it had not been peer-reviewed thoroughly in mainstream scientific journals. They contended that Jamin's results needed independent verification by other methods before any excavation permit could be granted. This was a reasonable scientific objection. But it also extended the approval process indefinitely. The third pressure, and this is rarely mentioned in international press, was heritage politics. In 2012, the very year Jamin applied for his permit, Peru was in the middle of a legal dispute with Yale University over the 46,000 artifacts Bingham had removed. Peru's political position was that Machu Picchu must be controlled by Peru, not by foreign expeditions. Granting a permit to a French archaeologist to excavate a previously unexplored section of Machu Picchu, at the very moment Peru was demanding Yale return its artifacts, was politically inconvenient. Jamin continued to request permits. In 2013, in 2014, in 2015, each time the request was either denied or delayed indefinitely. In November 2014, he was allowed to return to Machu Picchu to re-verify his 2012 results using the same electromagnetic equipment. This time, his team coordinated with researchers from the University of Cusco. The results confirmed what they had found before. The door and the chambers behind it were still there, unchanged. But still, no one was permitted to open them. By 2025, the sealed door on the western side of Machu Picchu remains intact. Millions of tourists walk past it every year with no idea what it is. Jamin's report sits in the Peruvian Ministry of Culture archive, publicly cited but never officially verified through excavation. One caveat the audience deserves: Jamin's electromagnetic resonance results have never been independently verified by another archaeological team. Some scientists remain skeptical of the method, yet his raw data is publicly available, and the Ministry of Culture has never officially disputed that the stone door exists. The dispute is only about what lies behind it. 13 years have passed since Jamin scanned Machu Picchu in 2012. More than a century has passed since Bingham first set foot on that ridge in 1911. 3 questions remain unanswered. The first question: what is actually behind the sealed door? Electromagnetic resonance tells us empty cavities exist. It does not tell us what is inside. There are 3 plausible hypotheses. Hypothesis 1: the burial place of earlier Inca emperors. In Inca tradition, deceased rulers were mummified and kept in temple complexes. Their mummies were worshipped and brought out during major ceremonies. When the Spanish invaded, Inca priests may have hidden the royal mummies at Machu Picchu to protect them. To this day, the mummy of Pachacuti has never been found. If it exists, it could be behind that door. Hypothesis 2: a treasury of gold and silver offerings to Inti, the sun god. When the empire collapsed, the Inca may have hidden their sacred objects so the Spanish could not seize them. Some estimates suggest the gold the Spanish never recovered would be worth billions of dollars at today's prices. Hypothesis 3: an entrance to Paititi, the final city of gold that Jamin has spent 30 years searching for. Perhaps the sealed door is not a destination, but a starting point of a tunnel network leading toward the Amazon. Until today, no one knows for certain, because no one has stepped through the second question: why does Peru not allow the excavation? The official reason is preservation. Machu Picchu was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983, and every intervention requires strict approval. This is true, but it is not the whole truth. The second reason is pressure from the indigenous Quechua community. Over the past 2 decades, the Andean indigenous rights movement has grown significantly. Bolivia elected Evo Morales as its first indigenous president in 2006. Ecuador passed a constitution recognizing the rights of nature in 2008. Against that backdrop, excavating an unexplored Inca structure without Quechua consent would be a political disaster. The third reason, and this is rarely discussed in international press, is heritage politics. The year 2012, exactly when Jamin applied for his permit, Peru was in a legal dispute with Yale over the Bingham artifacts. Peru's political position was that Machu Picchu must be controlled by Peru. Granting a permit to a French archaeologist to break through an untouched part of Machu Picchu while demanding Yale return its artifacts was politically unworkable. The third question: why is the electromagnetic resonance method still controversial? The instrument Jamin used is not mainstream archaeological equipment. Some scientists argue it is sensitive to electromagnetic artifacts in the environment, such as power lines, metals in the soil, or moisture, and can produce false positives. They demand verification by ground-penetrating radar or seismic survey before accepting Jamin's results. This is a reasonable scientific argument, but the consequence is this: 13 years later, no one has been permitted to verify it. Evidence suggests there is a sealed door. Evidence suggests there are chambers behind it. Until someone is allowed to open them, that is all we have. Return to the 3 questions from the opening. Why have you never heard of this sealed door? Because for more than a century, Western archaeology at Machu Picchu lacked the technology to detect it, until Jamin brought electromagnetic equipment in 2012, because international press cared less about it than about discoveries in Egypt. Because the Peruvian government does not promote a story it cannot finish. Why does Peru not open it? Official preservation. Pressure from the Quechua community. Heritage politics. Scientific dispute over Jamin's method. 4 reasons combined into a status quo that no party wants to break. What is behind the door? Evidence suggests it could be a royal Inca mummy never found. It could be a treasure of gold hidden before the Spanish arrived. It could be the starting point of a tunnel network leading to Paititi, the final city of gold Jamin has spent 30 years pursuing. Could be. And perhaps, and evidence suggests, that is all we have. No more. Machu Picchu still holds its secret. The door remains sealed. The dozen chambers behind it still wait. Perhaps our children's generation will know the answer. Perhaps never. Next week, we go to Rome, a landmark visited by 4 million people every year. They stand in the open arena, photograph the stone walls, imagine gladiators and lions, but directly beneath their feet, there is a vast network of tunnels, and inside that network, a system of 80 counterweight elevators, operating for 350 years without electricity, lifting 50-ton animals onto the arena floor in seconds. Beneath the Colosseum, something tourists never see on Earth: black box. The sources for this video include Thierry Jamin's 2012 electromagnetic resonance survey at Machu Picchu, archival material from the Yale Peabody Museum on Hiram Bingham, UNESCO World Heritage Records, and historical accounts published by Britannica and World History Encyclopedia. Full links are in the description below.